morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be with you today. Thanks for joining me. As we're embarking on our series on business process management and the human aspects of change management and team optimization, I am very excited to have you joining me today. This is the first in our series, our next 10-session series, where we're focused around the human aspects of change management. This is a topic that many of you have raised in our conversations and brought up and said, okay, it's great. We're talking about business process management, BPM programs, and creating a continuous improvement environment and engaging people. But let's step back and have a conversation around change and change management. How can we do that effectively? And so that spawned this topic. And so this is one of our new certifications. Will be in the space of human aspects of change management. If you were with us last session, we laid out what our game plan is, kind of what our roadmap looks like for exploring this particular topic and getting into some of the tools and tips and tricks and approaches that are important aspects for really managing change effectively and engaging your entire workforce in what becomes ultimately a shift in culture, right? So from that standpoint, we're going to be diving deep into each of the 10 areas. And today will be a good discussion around taking a systematic approach to change and change management. And what does that really look like? Because let's face it, when we're dealing with the human aspects, sometimes that can be a little unsettling at times, right? Processes, tools, systems, those things never talk back. But throw humans into the mix and it becomes a whole new conversation, right? So that's why we want to explore this piece. And today we'll start out with a discussion around the systematic approach to really looking at change and managing change. And then next week, we'll dive in a little bit deeper in terms of some of the mechanics and methodologies as well. So my name is Diana Willis. I'm the CEO and founder of the Pendolino Group. We are a strategic partner with Nintex ProMap, as you may know. Some of you are joining us. We've worked together with your implementations and onboarding. And again, in that context, the conversation of change management, of course, comes up. And also from that standpoint in the human resources space, as the Pendolino Group, we work with a large number of clients in the world of human resources and creating cultures that truly are designed to optimize what your business is out to create. Today, if you are new to our approach for these sessions, let me just give you a real quick recap of how things flow, and you'll know what we're up to. These are what we call our Snap webinars. They're designed to be 30 minutes or less, and so we move very quickly, hit a couple of topics. Usually when we come across good content, if I remember, I'll point it out for you to take a screenshot of it as well. Of course, all of the content is good. Ultimately, it's designed to open up conversations inside of your organization and also to give you some tips and tools that you can walk away with and actually put to good use right away. So these are very snappy kinds of webinars that we focus on. As I mentioned, this is part of a series. So if you join us through the entire series, you will also receive a certification as change management professional from the Pendolino Group. Our topics were going to be focused around continuous improvement culture, some of the features of that, the evolving nature of change and change management, as well as some best practices. So we always try to cover off on context as well as some very specific best practices that you can take with you, okay? Often during these sessions, we will also take a look specifically into the ProMap environment, so you can start to get a sense of how we leverage a particular tool set. Everything that I talk about, I always make sure that we speak broadly about it as well, so you know that this is not exclusively about a particular tool by any means, okay? And then we have time scheduled on each one of our sessions for an open discussion. Of course, if you have any questions along the way, the chat feature is open as well. Please drop your questions into that chat box. I'll keep an eye on that as well, try to get everything answered If by chance I don't have a chance to get to your question, please drop your question in there along with your email, and we'll definitely follow up with you by the end of today, okay? So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Today is our first of 10 topics in this area of addressing the human aspects of change management. And our first focus area will be on how we address the human side systematically. Okay. Again, recognizing that when we're dealing with change or any kind of shift that's taking place in our organizations, it may be as simple as introducing a new program, or it might be highly complex, a shift in business strategy, for example, or an intentional shift in the culture that you're creating in your organization. In our context, for example, creating a continuous improvement culture. Anytime that we're dealing with that, we have a human side, a human aspect that absolutely must be addressed. Significant transformation creates people issues. So it creates those issues. And when you can embrace that, you will actually be well positioned to proactively manage the situation and manage it over the course of time, to actually be able to assess where is your organization along a change curve, for example. And I'll share a couple of models here as we get into this topic a little bit deeper here. Because shifting a culture, a transformation, or introducing something like BPM into your organization, because that naturally creates people issues, you absolutely need a formal approach for managing change. And with that, one of the keys is that you choose a model, land upon a model that you are able to actually build upon. All right. Now, there are a variety of different models that are out there around change and change management. I've researched numerous options out there and have landed on a few that I'm going to bring forward today that I think really provide a nice, clear roadmap for you and help to take some of the mystery, if you will, out of this aspect of change management. At the end of the day, change management really is about dealing with the people issues, okay? From that standpoint, what we do want to also bring into this is that effectively managing change does require that we are quantitative and analytical, if you will, in those aspects. And so this is where we do create a demand for data and assessing where we are as an organization, where the shifts are as an organization, where you may have pockets of early adoption and where you may have pockets of very, very late adoption, also known as resistance, okay? And so we do need to be thinking very methodically about this and recognizing that what we do for change management, the plan that we have for change management, should be fully integrated into your entire program design. A program design or decisions around your program that do not take into consideration the human side, the human aspects, and thoughtfully consider how to manage those human aspects over time, that is an incomplete program. So that's why we're doing this deep dive into change management in the context of our BPM program. So from that standpoint, let me start introducing a couple of models to you. And I just kind of put these under the title of complicated formulas. So some of you have probably seen this, the Kubler-Ross model. I haven't put it up here on the screen yet, but just to speak to it briefly. The Kubler-Ross model and kind of the phases of change, denial, anger, acceptance, right? So from that standpoint, we have a particular model that we try to superimpose, if you will, upon the individuals, the people that are being affected by a change. And I use that word intentionally, superimpose, because quite often one of the things that a trap that we can fall into in the world of change management is the belief that, or at least the desire that, all sizes fit everyone, right? Or one size fits everyone. So what we want to go after, though, is considering that there may be a very methodical approach and way that we can take. But let's start with our basis here with two models. One is the change management model. The other one is Rogers' diffusion of innovation model. So let me share these with you so that you can start to get your arms wrapped around them. The model in blue here, so the blue line represents the Kubler-Ross classic change management model. And what it's telling us is, in terms of on the vertical axes, employee well-being and emotional state, whether on the high end, employees really engaged, they're or the intensity, and on the low end, they're very disengaged. And over time, on the horizontal axis, what tends to take place. So following the blue line here, what tends to take place when we introduce a change, and believe me when I say that the change is truly any change. It could be as simple as we've shifted the kinds of lunches that we're bringing into the organization, if we provide lunch, for example, or we've made the decision that we're no longer going to provide lunch. That may seem very benign on the surface, but trust me, everyone reacts and responds quite differently. There also might be a much more substantial change, which we're talking about in our context around business processes, business process improvement, continuous improvement, that environment, which fundamentally can shift people out of their comfort zone, the way that they've been doing work before. And they've built habits and rituals around that. And now we're shifting that, and that is threatening. Okay? So we need to really embrace that. As good as things look on the surface, that there is an element we've introduced change, and that is a human dynamic now. So what takes place over time, which may be a long period or it may be a very short period of time, is this cycle, this blue curve here. Okay, so if we just call it loosely structured change, a loosely structured change process, people are going to go through each of these phases to one degree or another, through denial, guilt, anger, bargaining, try to, I can outlive this one. We've talked about some of this in our sessions before. And certainly I know, as we've been in training sessions together or coaching together, that there may be points in time where people say, hey, I can outlive this BPM thing. I can, we've tried things before, they never take hold. And so one, I don't believe it. Two, I can survive through it, and it's going to disappear anyway, because it always does, right? So these are going to be the kinds of things you hear. And as you navigate through this, people will eventually move into some level of openness and acceptance, and ultimately moving into that area of being encouraged and evolved. Now, what we're looking for is, how can we move people through that curve faster? Because it is going to happen. And how can we make this valley here, if you will, some people refer to it as the valley of death. How can we make this valley more shallow? Well, that's where this model is introduced. This is the model of a well-managed change process, and Rogers introduced this, put a nice label on it called infusion of innovation. And this is intentionally, when we manage the change process, you'll notice that we're actually able to shorten the period of time that it takes for someone to move into that engaged, involved mindset. We're able to actually shorten that, make it happen faster. And we are also able to make this valley much shorter, if you will, okay? Certainly not make it as deep, right? So we're able to make it much shallower. So from that standpoint, this is the impact of well-managed change, a well-managed change process. So go ahead and grab a snapshot of this one if you'd like, so you can keep this in front of you, because this is ultimately what we were out to do, to bring people to a level of engagement much faster and to make the valley much more shallow. All right, so with that, let's think about this in a much more simplified way. Okay, so if we take on that change is a personal thing, and we go ahead and we acknowledge and accept that an environment of continuous improvement is by definition an environment of continuous change, then from that standpoint, we could apply a very simple model here as our starting point. And we could say, quite simply, that at any point in time, I should be able to assess my organization, and as a collective, as well as within pockets, I should be able to assess where is my team, where is a particular individual, where are they on this curve. And in doing that, now I can start to get a sense of how far along are we. Okay, so this is a much simpler curve. I like this one because it does start to quantify things, and it means that I can actually start segmenting and looking at my organization, looking at my team, actually looking at the individuals on the team and in conversation with them and asking them the kinds of questions that will ferret this out. So, what are your thoughts about the way where we're headed? How do you feel that this will impact you? What do you see in this change for you? How could this benefit you? Okay, what are your concerns? And through those kinds of questions, I can start to assess where is the organization collectively, where are the individuals, all right? So I know that every individual is going to go through this phase, is going to go through denial. One, I really liked what we were doing and how we were doing it before. It was comfortable. Right? I might not actually use those words that it was comfortable, but I would tell you that I actually liked the way that we were doing things before. Maybe we don't need to change. Two, a little bit of resistance there until I start to realize where there might be benefit for myself. And then through that benefit and the recognition and the adoption of that, you start to now see commitment. Okay? So let's take an example. We're introducing a BPM in our organization. Our goal is to document the processes. Let's use human resources as an example. We're going to document some of the core processes in human resources, and our stated intention in that is to be able to improve the level of service that we're offering for the employees to our clients. All right, so I'm now rolling this out. The very first thing that's going to happen is that individuals who are doing that process are going to start questioning what was wrong with what we did before. All right, the way that we were handling it, we were addressing the questions. And then we're going to start getting some resistance, and this is where it becomes personal. How will this affect me? All right, is my job at risk? Okay, that's where resistance starts to come in. Then as you involve them in the conversations, and that is the big differentiator, involving them in the conversation, involving them in documenting what currently is, and in starting to capture and hearing their ideas for what's possible, now they start to move into experimentation. That is the key differentiator, is involvement of those people in the organization, such that ultimately they move into a level they have ownership, and that's your evidence point in commitment. So that's what we want to be focused on. So this I find is a very simple, easy to quantify measure, and you can actually use this to test your organization. All right. So let's take a quick look at an 8-step process. I want to leave you with this one as a methodology that you might use for going through this. So first of all, this process hits on all the points that we talked about earlier. One, it systematically addresses the human aspects of change, and it's going to highlight the dynamics that you'll be able to leverage. Okay? Because remember, our goal is to accelerate the change process and to create a more shallow valley to minimize resistance to change. All right. So from that standpoint, one, we're accepting that any transformation creates people issues, and that we can use a formal approach for managing the change. We need to do that in order to have a whole program, right? So from that standpoint now, what we want to do is leverage data. Right, we saw that in our prior approach here, and also make sure that we're assessing and reassessing periodically. So very similar to what we would do in any process management program, where we would look at our processes and we would periodically measure and assess them. All right, so here's a 8-step process that is worth considering for your organization. Again, feel free to grab a screenshot of this one. This was presented by Dr. John Kotter. And from Kotter's leadership perspective, All right. You'll notice a couple of key themes here that we want to make sure that you're building into your programs. One is creating that climate for change. So from this standpoint, whether you are starting out with a crisis in hand in your organization, where there are real issues that are being dealt with and processes that are broken, and people know it, or you need to actually create the climate for change. You need to create a reason for change, also known as a continuous improvement environment, intentionally introducing change, right? So these are the first 3 steps for doing that. Creating a sense of urgency, creating a coalition, a group around that sense, and with that group in hand, developing the vision and the strategy. This is your program design. Okay, and your early engagement, your early adopters will be in this space. The next element is around engaging and enabling the broader organization. So now we're starting to expand out. I heard it described beautifully one of my conversations with actually one of our attendees here today. And the conversation was, I have a green patch and I want to take that small green patch and I want to slowly expand that green patch of grass out further and further and further. And that's what this engaging and enabling the organization is about. So look at the kinds of things that take place here. First of all, communicating the vision. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I like to say that if you communicate and you believe that everyone has gotten your message, communicate at least 3 more times, okay? Get it out there. Odds are there's still someone who hasn't heard it or hasn't fully understood it yet. So communicate, communicate. Next is to empower action, engage. So get people involved. We were talking about this is where we start to break through the resistance. We actually have people involved in creating the next versions, creating the next opportunities and improvements, okay? So we want to involve people in that. Give them the tools and get them involved. And then get quick wins that you can have early celebrations. You want to show progress quickly, okay? The last 2 elements are around implementing and sustaining the change, because change management truly never ends. So here we're looking for how do we sustain this change. This is where we continue to leverage wins to drive engagement, to drive change. Capture the wins, celebrate the wins, keep looking for the wins, keep encouraging more wins. Now it starts to get an engine of its own, if you will, and begins to embed in the culture so that it shows up in everything that you're doing around change and change management. Okay. Because this is about continuous improvement, now the way our curve begins to look is that we will assess the current state and we want to frequently and consistently be measuring where are we. Right? So from that standpoint, the last piece I'll leave you with as we're coming to the end of today is that we want to be zeroing in on ways that we can also be transparent. You probably picked up in my conversation with you today around the importance of engagement and communication and the wins and communicating the vision and involving people in creating the solutions. So all of those elements have to do with transparency. And so from that standpoint, one of the best practices that I've also seen is being transparent with the assessments. So this would be the spot where many organizations hesitate to talk about or to share, where are we? Where are we on our change curve? What's working and what isn't working? And what are the concerns that people have? And then addressing those concerns head on, all right? Actually engaging around those questions, those concerns, so that you can move and grow together. And again, one of the stickiest parts of change and change management is the human aspect. And so from that standpoint, when you lean into it and you take on being transparent with the assessments, what you're actually able to do is uplift the conversation. And so from here, in this perspective, you can actually look at where are we on this continual cycle of evolution. This cycle of, are we sitting in this current stage of change and entrepreneurship, where we're certain if we want what we want, but we're not certain if we can do it yet. And then we're starting to get into this space where, okay, now we're certain of what we can do and we're certain of what we want. And so now we're actually able to take advantage of that and then continuing on, intentionally unfreezing the organization, unfreezing and creating the need for change. If we call it crisis or a need for change or an opportunity for improvement, these are intentional, where we know there's something else. We know there's something more. We're uncertain of what it is, and we're uncertain if we can do it, but we're really curious and we want to go after it. And bringing that into this space of, all right, what can we create? We're certain we can create something else. We're not quite sure what it is yet. Let's explore what the opportunity is. And then moving on again into this entrepreneurship, into this change phase. So you get the sense this is a true evolution. This is another great slide to take a quick screenshot of, is as you're evolving through change, I think it's a model and an illustration like this one that really speaks to what a continuous improvement culture is about. And those cultures that are transparent with their assessment of where they are on this evolution, that is a best practice. That's what I encourage you to strive for. So that takes us through our conversation in terms of the human aspects of change management from the standpoint of dealing with this very dynamic element of the human conversation and the uncertainties that we intentionally create in the organization, and the uncertainties that intentionally exist continuously in a continuous improvement environment. So from that standpoint, what we want to do now in our next session is that we're going to take a deep dive into the elements around tactically, how do we manage through that? So I'd like to do now is go ahead and open it up, and let's just see if we've got any immediate questions that are around this particular topic. And if you've got any questions, anything at all, please feel free to just drop them right on into the Q&A section. We've got our chat box that's open. Looking forward to your questions here. And if I'm not able to get to your question, please just drop it in the Q&A. I'll be happy to get back to you. You can drop in your email address as well, and I'll be happy to loop back around with you as well. Okay, here's one question. All right, so Jane is asking the question around leadership and how to help your leaders. How do I help my leaders get comfortable with this? It's such a great question. So Jane, what I would say is that, first of all, you want to start the conversation with your leadership right where we have here. Acknowledge that change and change management is a human dynamic, and acknowledge that sometimes that can be really difficult. And that it's okay and important to open up the conversations with that. So where you can bring in a few of these models that we've talked about today, and in particular the 8-step, which I think starts to codify things, as well as the concept of unproductive change. Let me just go back real quick here. Unproductive change versus the unmanaged change, right? So here we go. So the change, unmanaged, loosely structured change, and how long this can take compared to a well-managed change process here. So this is a very powerful conversation with your leadership around well-managed change and how we can shorten the cycle so we get people to engagement faster, and we can make the valley much more shallow. In other words, make the resistance much more shallow. So we're able to move the organization faster, and we're able to get the engagement faster. So if you can start them there with that concept, then you've now opened the door so that you can absolutely have the conversation about how we can actually manage people through the evolution of change here, and ultimately be able to get our organization to a spot where we're going through these cycles very quickly. we've created a continuous improvement environment, and we're operating in this kind of state here. In order to get there, it does call for the transparency. And I think your leadership will be open to stepping into that kind of conversation, the transparency as well, once you lay out these frameworks, because then they can speak to the framework and they can share with the organization where they feel that everyone is and where they're headed. Hopefully that's helped a little bit, Jane. Thanks so much for the question. I appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at what next week's session is about. So in this next session, we're going to do a deep dive about where to start, which, perfect tee up, we're going to start at the top. So we're going to look at the human factors from the top of the organization, how we support the CEO and the leadership team, because we know that all eyes are going to turn toward them and that leaders need to embrace the change approaches first. In other words, they need to walk the talk. Okay. One important aspect here, it's important to always remember that our leadership, they are also composed of individuals who are going through stressful times. They are also going through the change. So from that standpoint, part of this is also managing change at the leadership level. All right. I really appreciate you joining me today. If you have any questions, again, either drop it into the chat box or send me a quick email, info@pendolinogroup.com, diana@pendolinogroup.com. You can also jump onto my calendar if you want to grab 20 minutes together real quick. Happy to do that, always. Just go ahead and do that, and then we will also have these sessions posted up onto our YouTube channel. Thanks so much again for joining us. I appreciate it very much. It's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. I look forward to you being a part of the certification series, and we will talk again next week. Take care.